Who are Rohingyas? The Rohingyas are a stateless Indo-Aryan people from Rakhine State, Myanmar. There were an estimated 1 million Rohingya living in Myanmar before the 2016 X-17 crisis. Majority of them are Muslim while a minority are Hindu. Described by the United Nations in 2013 as one of the most persecuted minorities in the world, the Rohingya population are denied citizenship under the 1982 Myanmar nationality law. According to Human Rights Watch, the 1982 laws effectively deny to the Rohingya the possibility of acquiring a nationality. Despite being able to trace Rohingya history to the 8th century, Myanmar law does not recognize the ethnic minority as one of the 8 national races. They are also restricted from freedom of movement, state education and civil service jobs. The legal conditions faced by the Rohingya in Myanmar have been compared with apartheid. The Rohingyas have faced military crackdowns in 1978, 1991 x 1992, 2012, 2015 and 2016 x 2017. UN officials and HRW have described Myanmar's persecution of the Rohingya as ethnic cleansing. The UN Human Rights Envoy to Myanmar reported the long history of discrimination and persecution against the Rohingya community could amount to crimes against humanity, and there have been warnings of an unfolding genocide. Yang Healy, the UN Special Investigator on Myanmar, believes the country wants to expel its entire Rohingya population. Under the 2008 constitution, the Myanmar military still control much of the country's government, including the Ministries of Home, Defence and Border Affairs, 25% of seats in Parliament and 1 Vice President. The Rohingya maintain their long-standing residence of Western Myanmar, with their community being the descendants of the inhabitants of pre-colonial Arakan and colonial Arakan. Rohingya legislators and MPs were elected to the parliaments of Myanmar until persecution increased in the late 20th century. Despite accepting the term Rohingya in the past, the current official position of the Myanmar government is that Rohingyas are not a national race, but are illegal immigrants from neighbouring Bangladesh. Myanmar's government has stopped recognising the term Rohingya and prefers to refer to the community as Bengalis. Rohingya campaign groups, notably the Arakan Rohingya National Organisation, demand the right to self-determination within Myanmar. Probes by the UN have found evidence of increasing incitement of hatred and religious intolerance by ultranationalist Buddhists against Rohingyas, while the Myanmar security forces have been conducting summary executions, enforced disappearances, arbitrary arrests and detentions, torture and ill-treatment and forced labour against the community. According to the United Nations, the human rights violations against the Rohingyas could be termed crimes against humanity. Before the 2015 Rohingya refugee crisis and the military crackdown in 2016 and 2017, the Rohingya population in Myanmar was around 1.1 to 1.3 million, chiefly in the northern Rakhine townships, which were 98% Rohingya. Over 900,000 Rohingya refugees have fled to southeastern Bangladesh as well as 2 other surrounding countries and major Muslim nations. More than 100,000 Rohingyas in Myanmar are confined in camps for internally displaced persons. Following a Rohingya rebel attack that killed 12 security forces, August 25, 2017, the military launched clearance operations that left 4,300 dead, many more injured, tortured or raped, villages burned, and over 400,000 Rohingya, about 40% of the remaining Rohingya in Myanmar, fleeing to Bangladesh. Rejected by the country they call home and unwanted by its neighbours, the Rohingya are impoverished, virtually stateless and have been fleeing Myanmar in droves and for decades. The modern term Rohingya emerged from colonial and pre-colonial terms Rohingya and Rwanda. Rohingya refer to themselves as Rohingya. In the dominant languages of the region, they are known as Rohingya, following the MLCTS, in Burmese and Rohingya in Bengali. The term Rohingya may come from Rakhine or Rohingya, the words for the state of Arakan. The word Rohingya would then mean inhabitant of Rohang, which was the early Muslim name for Arakan. Andrew Dan argues it comes from the Arabic word Ram, God's blessing, and speculates that early Muslims in Rakhine referred to themselves as God's blessed people. The usage of the term Rohingya has been historically documented prior to the British Raj. In 1799, Francis Buchanan Hamilton wrote an article called A Comparative Vocabulary of Some of the Languages Spoken in the Burma Empire. Among the native groups of Rakhine, he wrote, are the Mohammedans, who have long settled in Rakhine, and who call themselves Rohingya, or natives of Rakhine. The Classical Journal of 1811 identified Rohingya as one of the languages spoken in the Burma Empire. In 1815, Johann Severin Bater listed Rohingya as an ethnic group with a distinct language in a compendium of languages published in German. According to Jacques Leider, the Rohingya were referred to as Chittagonians during the British colonial period, and it was not controversial to refer to them as Bengalis until 1990s. Leider also states that there is no international consensus on the use of the term Rohingya, as they are often called Rohingya Muslims, Muslim Rakhinis, and Burmese Muslims. Others, such as anthropologist Christina Fink, uses Rohingya not as an ethnic identifier but as a political one. Leider believes the Rohingya is a political movement that started in the 1950s to create an autonomous Muslim zone in Rakhine. The government of Myanmar Prime Minister U, when Myanmar was a democracy from 1948 to 1962, used the term Rohingya. When the Mae Frontier District was created covering Rohingya majority areas, the term Rohingya was recognized by the Burmese government. The term was broadcast on Burmese radio and was used in the speeches of Burmese rulers. A UNHCR report on refugees caused by Operation King Dragon referred to the victims as Bengali Muslims, called Rohingyas. Nevertheless, the term Rohingya wasn't widely used until the 1990s. Today the use of the name Rohingya is polarized. The government of Myanmar refuses to use the name. In the 2014 census, the Myanmar government forced the Rohingya to identify themselves as Bengali. Many Rohingya see the denial of their name similar to denying their basic rights, and the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Myanmar has agreed. Jacques Leider writes that many Muslims in Rakhine simply prefer to call themselves Muslim Rakhinis or Muslims coming from Rakhine instead of Rohingya. The United States Embassy in Rangoon continues to use the name Rohingya. Early history. The Rohingya population is concentrated in the historical region of Rakhine, an old coastal country of Southeast Asia. It is not clear who were the original settlers of Rakhine. Burmese nationalist claims that the Rakhine inhabited Rakhine since 3000 BCE are not supported by any archaeological evidence. By the 4th century, Rakhine became one of the earliest Indianized kingdoms in Southeast Asia. The first Rakhine state flourished in Danyawadi. Power then shifted to the city of Waithali. Sanskrit inscriptions in the region indicate that the founders of the first Rakhine states were Indian. Rakhine was ruled by the Chandra dynasty. The British historian Daniel George Edward Hall stated that the Burmese do not seem to have settled in Rakhine until possibly as late as the 10th century AD. Hence earlier dynasties are thought to have been Indian, ruling over a population similar to that of Bengal. All the capitals known to history have been in the north near modern Agayab. Arrival of Islam, 8th to the 9th century. Due to its coastline on the Bay of Bengal, Rakhine was a key centre of maritime trade and cultural exchange between Burma and the outside world since the time of the Indo-Aryan Empire. Arab merchants had been in contact with Rakhine since the 3rd century, using the Bay of Bengal to reach Rakhine. Starting in the 8th century, Arab merchants began conducting missionary activities, and many locals converted to Islam. Some researchers have speculated that Muslims used trade routes in the region to travel to India and China. A southern branch of the Silk Road connected India, Burma and China since the Neolithic period. Arab traders are recorded in the coastal areas of southeast Bengal, bordering Rakhine. Since the 9th century, the Rohingya population traced their history to this period. Besides locals converting to Islam, Arab merchants married local women and later settled in Rakhine. As a result of intermarriage and conversion, the Muslim population in Rakhine grew. Modern-day Rohingya believe they descended from these early Muslim communities. Settlers from Burma proper, 9th to the 15th century. The Rakhines were one of the tribes of the Burmese city-states. The Rakhines began migrating to Rakhine through the Rakhine Mountains in the 9th century. The Rakhines established numerous cities in the valley of the Lemro River. These included Sambawaki, Painsa, Parain, Hikrit, Sambawak II, Myohang, Taunga and Lonrit. Burmese forces invaded the Rakhine cities in 1406. The Burmese invasion forced Rakhine rulers to seek help and refuge from neighbouring Bengal in the north. Kingdom of Morocco. Early evidence of Bengali Muslim settlements in Rakhine date back to the time of Min Somon, 1430-34, of the Kingdom of Morocco. After 24 years of exile in Bengal, he regained control of the Arakanese throne in 1430 with military assistance from the Bengal Sultanate. The Bengalis who came with him formed their own settlements in the region. The Santikan Mosque, built in the 1430s, features a court which measures 65 feet from north to south and 82 feet from east to west. The shrine is a rectangular structure measuring 33 feet by 47 feet. King Min Somon ceded some territory to the Sultan of Bengal and recognized his sovereignty over the areas. In recognition of his kingdom's vassal status, the Buddhist kings of Arakan received Islamic titles and used the Bengali gold dinar within the kingdom. Min Somon minted his own coins with the Burmese alphabet on one side and the Persian alphabet on the other. Arakan's vassalage to Bengal was brief. After Sultan Jalaluddin Muhammad Shah's death in 1433, Naramikla's successors invaded Bengal and occupied Ramu in 1437 and Chittagong in 1459. Arakan would hold Chittagong until 1666. Even after independence from the Sultans of Bengal, the Arakanese kings continued the custom of maintaining Muslim titles. The Buddhist kings compared themselves to sultans and fashioned themselves after mono rulers. They also continued to employ Muslims in prestigious positions within the royal administration. Some of them worked as Bengali, Persian and Arabic scribes in the Arakanese courts, which, despite remaining Buddhist, adopted Islamic fashions from the neighbouring Bengal Sultanate. The population increased in the 17th century as slaves were brought in by Arakanese raiders and Portuguese settlers following raids into Bengal. Slaves included members of the Mughal nobility. A notable royal slave was Alul, a renowned poet in the Arakanese court. The slave population were employed in a variety of workforces, including in the king's army, commerce and agriculture. In 1660, Prince Shah Shuja, the governor of New Bengal and a claimant of the Peacock throne, fled to Rakhine with his family after being defeated by his brother Emperor Aurangzeb during the Battle of Kharwa. Shuja and his entourage arrived in Rakhine on the 26th of August 1660. He was granted asylum by King Sandathudhama. In December 1660, the Arakanese king confiscated Shia's gold and jewellery, leading to an insurrection by the royal Mughal refugees. According to varying accounts, Shia's family was killed by the Arakanese, while Shuja himself may have fled to a kingdom in Myanmar. However, members of Shia's entourage remained in Rakhine and were recruited by the royal army, including as archers and court guards. They were kingmakers in Rakhine until the Burmese conquest. The Arakanese continued their raids of Mughal Bengal. Dhaka was raided in 1625. Emperor Aurangzeb gave orders to his governor in Mughal Bengal, Shaista Khan, to end what the Mughals saw as Arakanese Portuguese piracy. In 1666, Shaista Khan led a 6,000-man army and 288 warships to seize Chittagong from the Kingdom of Morocco. The Mughal expedition continued up till the Caledon River. The Mughals placed the northern part of Arakan under its administration and vassalage. The Muslim population became concentrated in northern Arakan. In 1960, Burmese Health Minister Sultan Mahmud cited the Caledon River as the boundary between Rohingya and Rakhine areas. Burmese conquest. Following the Konbaun dynasty's conquest of Arakan in 1785, as many as 35,000 people of the Rakhine State fled to the neighbouring Chittagong region of British Bengal in 1799 to escape persecution by the Bamar and to seek protection under the British Raj. The Bamar executed thousands of men and deported a considerable portion of people from Rakhine population to central Burma, leaving Rakhine a scarcely populated area by the time the British occupied it. According to an article on the Burma Empire, published by the British Francis Buchanan Hamilton in 1799, the Mohammedans, who have long settled in Rakhine, call themselves Rohingya, or natives of Rakhine. However, according to Derek Token, Hamilton no longer used the term to refer to the Muslims in Rakhine in his later publications. Sir Henry Yule saw many Muslims serving as eunuchs in Konbaung while on a diplomatic mission to the Burmese capital, Ava. British colonial rule. British policy encouraged Bengali inhabitants from adjacent regions to migrate into the then lightly populated and fertile valleys of Rakhine as farm labourers. The East India Company extended the Bengal Presidency to Rakhine. There was no international boundary between Bengal and Rakhine and no restrictions on migration between the regions. In the early 19th century, thousands of Bengalis from the Chittagong region settled in Rakhine seeking work. It is hard to know whether these new Bengal migrants were the same population that was deported by force to Bengal's Chittagong during the Burmese conquest in the 18th century and later returned back to Rakhine as a result of British policy, or they were a new migrant population with no ancestral roots to Rakhine. The British census of 1872 reported 58,255 Muslims in Akayab district. By 1911, the Muslim population had increased to 178,647. The waves of migration were primarily due to the requirement of cheap labour from British India to work in the paddy fields. Immigrants from Bengal, mainly from the Chittagong region, moved en masse into western townships of Rakhine. Albeit Indian immigration to Burma was a nationwide phenomenon, not just restricted to Rakhine. For these reasons, historians believe that most Rohingyas arrived with the British colonialists in the 19th and 20th centuries, with some tracing their ancestry much further. According to Thantmayan Yu, historian and advisor to President Thein Sein, at the beginning of the 20th century, Indians were arriving in Burma at the rate of no less than 250,000 per year. The numbers rose steadily until the peak year of 1927. Immigration reached 480,000 people, with Rangoon exceeding New York City as the greatest immigration port in the world. This was out of a total population of only 13 million. It was equivalent to the United Kingdom today taking 2 million people a year. By then, in most of the largest cities in Burma, Yangon, Sittmu, Pathain and Molamine, the Indian immigrants formed the majority of the population. The Burmese under the British rule felt helpless, and reacted with a racism that combined feelings of superiority and fear. Professor Andrew Self of Griffith University writes that although a few Rohingya traced their ancestry to Muslims who lived in Rakhine in the 15th and 16th centuries, most Rohingyas arrived with the British colonialists in the 19th and 20th centuries. The impact of British immigration was particularly acute in Rakhine. Although it boosted the colonial economy, local Arakanese bitterly resented it. According to historian Cleve J. Christie, the issue became a focus for grassroots Burmese nationalism, and in the years 1930-31 there were serious anti-Indian disturbances in Lower Burma, while 1938 saw riots specifically directed against the Indian Muslim community. As Burmese nationalism increasingly asserted itself before the Second World War, the alien Indian presence inevitably came under attack, along with the religion that the Indian Muslims imported. The Muslims of northern Rakhine were to be caught in the crossfire of this conflict. Shipping. Due to the terrain of the Rakhine Mountains, the Rakhine region was mostly accessible by sea. In British Rakhine Division, the port of Akayab had ferry services and a thriving trade with the ports of Chittagong, Narayanganj, Dhaka and Calcutta in British India, as well as with Rangoon. Akayab was one of the leading rice ports in the world, hosting ship fleets from Europe and China. 128. Many Indians settled in Akayab dominated its seaport and hinterland. The 1931 census found 500,000 Indians living in Akayab. Legislators. Several Arakanese Indians were elected to Burmese native seats in the Legislative Council of Burma and Legislature of Burma. During the 1936 Burmese general election, Advocate Ufo Kayan was elected from Akayab West and Gani Markin was elected from Wondobuthitown. In 1939, Utanvi Markin was elected from Wondobuthitown. Their elections in the Burmese native category set them apart from immigrant Indian legislators. World War II. During World War II, the Imperial Japanese Army, IJA, invaded British-controlled Burma. The British forces retreated, and in the power vacuum left behind, considerable intercommunal violence erupted between Rakhines and Muslim villagers. The British armed Muslims in northern Rakhine in order to create a buffer zone that would protect the region from a Japanese invasion when they retreated and to counteract the largely pro-Japanese ethnic Rakhines. The period also witnessed violence between groups loyal to the British and the Burmese nationalists. The Rakhine massacres in 1942 involved communal violence between British armed V-Force Rohingya recruits and pro-Japanese Rakhines, polarizing the region along ethnic lines. Tensions boiling in Rakhine before the war erupted during the Japanese invasion of Southeast Asia, and Rakhine became the front line in the conflict. The war resulted in a complete breakdown of civil administration and consequent development of habits of lawlessness exacerbated by the availability of modern arms. The Japanese advance triggered an intercommunal conflict between Muslims and Buddhists. The Muslims fled towards British-controlled Muslim-dominated northern Rakhine from Japanese-controlled Buddhist majority areas. This stimulated a reverse ethnic cleansing in British-controlled areas, particularly around Wando. Failure of British counter-offensive attempted from December 1942 to April 1943 resulted in abandonment of even more of the Muslim population as well as increase in intercommunal violence. Moshe Yeager, a research fellow at Truman Institute, Hebrew University of Jerusalem, that hostility had developed between the Muslims and the Buddhists that had brought about a similar hostility in other parts of Burma. This tension was let loose with the retreat of the British. With the approach of Japanese into Rakhine, the Buddhists instigated cruel measures against the Muslims. Thousands, though the exact number is unknown, fled from Buddhist-majority regions to eastern Bengal and northern Rakhine, with many being killed or dying of starvation. The Muslims in response conducted retaliatory raids from British-controlled areas, causing Buddhists to flee to southern Rakhine. Ai-chan, a historian at Kanto University in Japan, has written that as a consequence of acquiring arms from the British during World War II, Rohingyas tried to destroy the Rakhines villages instead of resisting the Japanese. Chan agrees that hundreds of Muslims fled to northern Rakhine, though states that the accounts of atrocities on them were exaggerated. In March 1942, Rohingyas from northern Rakhine killed around 20,000 Rakhines. In return, around 5,000 Muslims in the Minbu and Rock U townships were killed by Rakhines and Red Karens. As in the rest of Burma, the IJA committed acts of rape, murder and torture against Muslims in Rakhine. During this period, some 22,000 Muslims in Rakhine were believed to have crossed the border into Bengal, then part of British India, to escape the violence. The exodus was not restricted to Muslims in Rakhine. Thousands of Burmese Indians, Anglo-Burmese and British who settled during colonial period emigrated en masse to India. To facilitate their re-entry into Burma, British formed volunteer forces with Rohingya. Over the 3 years during which the Allies and Japanese fought over the Malay Peninsula, the Rohingya recruits of the V-Force engaged in a campaign against Rakhines communities, using weapons provided by V-Force. According to the Secretary of British Governor, the V-Force, instead of fighting the Japanese, destroyed Buddhist monasteries, pagodas, and houses, and committed atrocities in northern Rakhine. The British Army's liaison officer Anthony Irwin, on the other hand, praised the role of the V-Force. Pakistan Movement. During the Pakistan movement in the 1940s, Rohingya Muslims in western Burma organised a separatist movement to merge the region into East Pakistan. The commitments of the British regarding the status of Muslims after the war are not clear. V-Force officers like Andrew Irwin felt that Muslims along with other minorities must be rewarded for their loyalty. Muslim leaders believed that the British had promised them a Muslim national area in Myanmar region. They were also apprehensive of a future Buddhist-dominated government. In 1946, calls were made for annexation of the territory by Pakistan as well as of an independent state. Before the independence of Burma in January 1948, Muslim leaders from Rakhine addressed themselves to Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan, and asked his assistance in incorporating the Maya region to Pakistan, considering their religious affinity and geographical proximity with East Pakistan. The North Rakhine Muslim League was founded in Atgayab, modern Situ. 2 months later, the proposal never materialized since it was reportedly turned down by Jinnah, saying that he was not in a position to interfere into Burmese matters. 118. Post-remigration. The numbers and the extent of post-independence immigration from Bangladesh are subject to controversy and debate. In a 1955 study published by Stanford University, the authors Virginia Thompson and Richard Idloff write, the post-war, World War II, illegal immigration of Chittagonians into the area was on a vast scale, and in the Mwandaw and Buthi Down areas they replaced the Arakanese. The authors further argued that the term Rohingya, in the form of Rohingya, first appeared to distinguish settled population from newcomers. The newcomers were called Mujahids, crusaders, in contrast to the Rohingya or settled Chittagonian population. According to the International Crisis Group, ICG, these immigrants were actually the Rohingyas who were displaced by the World War II and began to return to Rakhine after the independence of Burma but were rendered as illegal immigrants, while many were not allowed to return. ICG adds that there were some 17,000 refugees from the Bangladesh Liberation War who subsequently returned home. Burmese independence. The Rohingya community was recognized as an indigenous ethnic nationality of Burma, with members of the group serving as representatives in the Burmese parliament, as well as ministers, parliamentary secretaries, and other high-ranking government positions. But since Burma's military junta took control of the country in 1962, the Rohingya have been systematically deprived of their political rights. Rohingya political participation in Burma. In the prelude to independence, 2 Rakhinese Indians were elected to the Constituent Assembly of Burma in 1947, including M.A. Ghaffar and Sultan Ahmed. After Burma became independent in 1948, M.A. Ghaffar presented a memorandum of appeal to the government of the Union of Burma calling for the recognition of the term Rohingya, based on local Indian names of Arakan, Rowan and Rohang, as the official ethnicity of Arakanese Indians. Sultan Ahmed, who served as parliamentary secretary to the Ministry of Minorities, was a member of the Justice Serbau Commission charged with exploring whether Arakan division should be granted statehood. During the Burmese general election, 1951, 5 Rohingyas were elected to the Parliament of Burma, including one of the country's first 2 female MPs, Zura Begum. 6 MPs were elected during the Burmese general election, 1956 and subsequent by-elections. Sultan Mahmud, a former politician in British India, became Minister of Health in the cabinet of Prime Minister of Burma UNU. In 1960, Mahmud suggested that either Rohingya majority Northern Arakan remain under the central government or be made a separate province. However, during the Burmese general election, 1960, Prime Minister UNU's pledges included making all of Arakan into one province. The 1962 Burmese coup ended the country's Westminster-style political system. The 1982 Burmese citizenship law stripped most of the Rohingyas of their stake in citizenship. Rohingya community leaders were supportive of the 8,888 uprising for democracy. During the Burmese general election, 1990, the Rohingya-led National Democratic Party for Human Rights won 4 seats in the Burmese parliament. The 4 Rohingya MPs included Shamsul Anwarul Haq, Chitlawin Ibrahim, Fazul Ahmed and Nair Ahmed. The election was won by the National League for Democracy led by Aung San Suu Kyi, who was placed under house arrest and not permitted to become Prime Minister. The Burmese military junta banned the National Democratic Party for Human Rights in 1992. Its leaders were arrested, jailed and tortured. Rohingya politicians have been jailed to disbar them from contesting elections. In 2005, Shamsul Anwarul Haq was charged under Section 18 of the controversial 1982 Burmese citizenship law and sentenced to 47 years in prison. In 2015, a ruling Solidarity and Development Party MP Shwimon was disbarred from the Burmese general election,